following is a production of Shark Flight Media. Shark Flight Media. Shark Flight Media. Shark Flight Media.
Now entering the nexus of geekery and guy world in 3, 2, 1. Mark.
Hello, IT. Have you tried turning it off and on again?
What's better than this? Guys being dudes.
This is the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast.
Hey kids, welcome back to another exciting edition of the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. I am your host, Ian J. Malone, going to be joined in just a couple of minutes by my usual partners in crime. That would, of course, be Rob Howell, Kevin Steverson. Got a packed show in the house for you tonight. We got Mr. Jon R. Osborne in the house to talk about what's been going on with him, specifically the new Four Horsemen Universe role-playing game. We got book news, we got event news, we got your pod mail questions. It is stacked, and all thanks to our presenting sponsor. That would, of course, be Chris Kennedy Publishing. Doesn't matter what you're into, mill sci-fi, space opera, pew-pew, fantasy, magic, urban fantasy, romance. They have got it all over there at Chris Kennedy Publishing. They are, of course, message-free sci-fi with a slice of fantasy. You can find out all about them by visiting chriskennedypublishing.com. Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. When the sponsor URLs are super easy to remember and read right off of the liner. Rob and Kevin, how are we doing this evening, friends?
Doing great, doing great.
What's the word with everybody? Everybody have a good weekend?
Well, I'm excited because Friday, of course, I've got The Ravening of Wolves coming out, which, of course, we'll talk about some more.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm really excited. This has been a week of thanking a bunch of people for all the things that they've allowed me to do in the Four Horsemen Universe. So find me on Facebook, and you can see all the people I've thanked.
Yeah, rumor has it early reviews on that one have been fantastic so far. So, but yeah, you said a second ago, we're going to get to that. So folks who want to know a little bit more about Ravening of Wolves, we're going to have that coming up in our second half segment. Kevin, what's the word with you, man? What you been up to since last we chatted?
It's been a pretty good week. Tomorrow is my birthday, so I'll be 39 again. I'm pretty good at it. I think it's like my 14th time at it, so I'm a professional. If you guys need any advice or anything on being 39, I'm the one. Hall of Fame several times, several times over. But anyhow, and I got a little bit of a surprise came from the publisher, and we'll talk about that later. It's a birthday surprise, so
ooh,
so we'll talk about it in just a little bit.
Surprise is good, and we got pooches in the house this evening.
I got a house full of dogs here, so what are you gonna do?
My beagle is downstairs, passed out on a couch somewhere. In her older years, man, she's holy cow, that dog sleeps. So she is legendary. She is a great napper. Sorry, well, speaking of announcements and events and so on and so forth, we actually had quite a big one, a number of big ones at Fantasy this year, but one of the most notable was the announcement that the Four Horsemen Universe is going to get its own RPG game. So a lot of people have been asking this for years now. And it is finally happening. Mark Wandry, Jon Osborne got together at the con, rolled it out, unveiled the Kickstarter stuff, unveiled the cover. Like, it is full on, full bore on. So we figured, why not bring one of those guys on? And that would, of course, be Mr. Jon Osborne, who joins us now. Welcome to the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast, man. How are you this evening?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Thanks for coming on board. It's good to hear from you. So, big announcement. A lot of people are really excited about this. A lot of people have been clamoring for this, and it's finally happening. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of how the game works here shortly, but just talk to people about how this actually came to be.
So the Four Horsemen Universe has, in part of its DNA, a game called BattleTech, mecha combat. I think there's a heavy influence on not only Mark, but several other writers. And, of course, as soon as readers started getting into the Four Horsemen Universe, they started seeing some comparisons. They're asking, well, hey, when can we have a game like this? And Mark and I talked about it, and I was like, well, we could do an RPG. And we stewed on it for a couple of years, and then we finally decided to go ahead and push the button on it. Things started going from there. We had to apply to get our license after we decided on a system. And we've spent the past year building it up to get ready for the Kickstarter. So even though the Kickstarter just launched, we've been working on this game for a year. Well, actually a year plus.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm not a huge player in the Savage World system, but I've been told that it's got a lot of flexibility for a variety of game universes, in the sense that it sort of can adapt itself to just about any kind of genre. So why did you choose Savage Worlds? What were some of the others you were thinking about?
The flexibility of the Savage World system was one of the key things that led us to decide on it. There was three other avenues actually we considered going. The first avenue would be to create a whole system from scratch. The downside of that is, well, since it's a new system, there are no fans of said system, and be a lot more involved as far as working on the balance for the game. We'd have to include all the rules in the base book, which means that either the book is bigger, thus more expensive, or there's less space for Four Horsemen stuff. Another obvious possibility was the D20 system. People know from D&D and Pathfinder. And while I love D&D, the stratified system just didn't feel like a good fit for the Four Horsemen universe.
Explain what you mean by the stratified system. I'm not quite sure what I know what you're pointing at.
Well, it's the level-based system. You're
okay.
level 1 fighter, level 5 fighter, level 10 fighter. And while it's really good for epic fantasy kind of stuff, more of a nitty-gritty kind of game, that's not its strength.
So how does it work with the mech combat? I know you've done some playtesting with it at Fantasy and other places, and obviously mech combat is going to be part of it. How's that working so far?
Oh, it's been great. The playtest we've done, one of the comments which really pleases me is that it feels like we're in the books.
Nice.
The mech combat is fast, furious, at times bloody, and we're striking that balance between players feeling like they're in peril versus it just being a total, meat grinder.
You don't want to have them die in character creation like Traveler.
No. It's no fun if you step off the dropship and bang, you're dead, next character.
Like I've done to a few red shirts in my time.
I was going to say, that has been known to happen in the 4HC from time to time.
So tell me some more about the game. What do you think is really cool about, what is the most awesome aspect of it you're finding so far?
Well, with the flexibility comes a certain speed. For those people that are really into RPGs, there are some systems that, while they're very detailed, those details come at a cost in time. It's a slog. You spend an hour playing one turn. No one wants to do that. We did several turns of combat in 2.5 hours at Fantasy this year. And this was with players who only one of them was an experienced Savage World player. I think about half of the remainder had played it once or twice before, and the other few had not played it at all.
And this was with a full table, correct?
Yes, this is a full table. It was a full squad out of Bjorn's Berserkers. I actually pulled a scenario out of my last Bjorn's Berserkers book. But it was great to see people able just to pick up the dice and go.
Nice. We've talked about this a little bit. Tell me about this as one of your lifetime goals.
So I've been a game player and actually a game master since I was 13. When I went out and bought my first box set of Dungeons & Dragons, well, I had to teach my friends how to play, and I had to be the dungeon master because that was the only way I could play. And as I got older, I got more into the game design aspect of it. Fun fact, I actually interviewed with Gary Gygax with this company after TSR, right after I got out of college. Of course, I was a kid with no editing experience or writing credentials, so I didn't get the job. But, it was a really cool opportunity to get to talk to him and some of the other notable names in the D&D history.
Well, that is pretty awesome. Did they have any specific bits and pieces of advice that you can recall?
Oh, wow. Keep playing, keep writing. Those are the big ones I remember. If you stop creating, you stagnate.
That's absolutely true. And to be honest, I've talked to Steve Jackson about this sort of thing, about game creation in general. And that mirrors what he says. And he also said something along the line of be ready for things to not go exactly as you plan, because they never do when creating a game, is something he also mentioned. So not only are you creating a game, you created a Kickstarter, and that's sort of its own adventure path in its own right. So tell us about making a Kickstarter in general.
So the Kickstarter is probably the most daunting part for me. Now, for fair disclosure, Mark is handling the heavy lifting on the Kickstarter side of the business because he has experience with it. But we had to go through and do our homework because it's real easy to think you've raised a bunch of money on a Kickstarter and find out that you're losing even more.
Right. So you've got to make sure that you are have accurate quote. What I'm hearing is you want accurate quotes on what it's going to cost to actually produce the artwork and the book itself, and all the other bits and pieces that you're putting out.
Right. You don't realize how much goes into a production of an RPG book until you actually try to put one together. And I'll tell you, doing an RPG book is 10 times harder than writing a novel.
Expand on that.
Well, I thought, okay, RPG book, it's probably going to be around 50,000 words because you have lots of art, you have charts, stuff like that. And, it's going to be more structured, so it'll be easy to write. But there are so many moving pieces. And if you change one thing in one part of the game, you have to look at, okay, how is this going to affect these other parts down here? One of the things we learned between the Fantasy play test is, we did a balance pass on our weapons and armor and stuff to make sure that, again, players didn't march out in the battlefield and just get zapped by a best width with a laser and that's it.
So yeah, that makes sense. You change a bonus on a weapon, and then you have to go backfill every place where that weapon has that sort of stuff marked down, and that can be tedious. It sounds like.
And there's a challenge of taking what's in the books and trying to convert that to actual numbers and get it to all kind of balance and make sense and still stay, true to the heart of the books, because the Four Horsemen Universe has over a dozen novel authors and probably close to 100 short story authors, maybe.
It's something like that. It's an amazing number at this point, yes.
But that also means that there is a ton of material to draw from. So, for example, currently, aliens are the bane of my existence because I've been slogging my way through the alien stat blocks. And it's like, okay, here's the alien entry. Where have we seen this alien before? I go to things like the wiki. I look in various books. I try to get the information that, that's in print on the alien. Go to our own source material, which has evolved over the years. And then, and in some cases, it's a matter of, okay, in one book, I'll take Flatar for an example. In one book, someone holds a Flatar in the palm of their hand. And in another book, a Flatar is about a meter tall. Dressed in clothes, bulky clothes, it could, pass for a small child in the dark. It's the size of it. So there's like a big discrepancy there. And so we have to kind of hit on, okay, what are we going to go with? One of the things I like to say with the Four Horsemen Universe, when we talk about the different descriptions and the cover art and stuff like that, is the stories are actually being told by alien observers. And that's why we're getting these different points of views, because they're describing it secondhand without our human frame of reference.
Well, that's a good hand-wavy way to put it. I'm fully aware of the challenges. I've had a number of challenges with just the two aliens that I'm paying attention to, and that's the Zool and the Kashkala. And a lot of what went into Ravening of Wolves was working with Mark and Marissa, who've done a lot of work with the Zool, to make sure that I'm not stepping on their toes completely. They're not a complete monoculture, but there's a lot of connections there, and trying to keep that consistent challenge. And that's just one race. And then we get into all the others. It's a huge, huge universe, which has been a great sandbox for us all, but I can totally see that set of challenges.
Actually, John, I wanted to go back and just circle back to something that you touched upon just a second ago, and that was just the transition of going from writing fiction to writing for an RPG. A lot of people in our business, in our genre that we run into at cons, are authors and masterminds behind these massive universes, and something like an RPG very much fits into the wheelhouse of what their fans would love to see. If you could give one piece of advice to an author looking to maybe make that jump to this medium, what would that be?
Get partners.
Well done, sir.
I'm serious on that. One of the things that we are struggling with is we don't have an in-house graphics person. I've noticed that with a lot of RPG groups. And a lot of these RPG companies, are, a handful of people either collaborating online or, working out of someone's, spare room or, home office, garage, what have you. But a lot of them have someone who is a good graphic designer and an artist who knows things like, Photoshop and probably InDesign and things like that.
Well, I will tell you, I got some names to point at you after we get done here, because I've learned some of that myself in some of the projects I've been working with in New Mythology. So we'll talk. But let's move on to you a little bit. We've done a lot of talking about the Kickstarter, but you said something sort of in passing about Fantasy, and that's Bjorn's Berserkers. Tell us about Bjorn's Berserkers and where it started and where you think it's going to go.
Well, Bjorn's Berserkers started as basically my audition for Chris Kennedy Publishing. I kind of had a front row seat when Mark and Chris put the universe together, and it was at In Conjunction a few years ago. And this was the second time that Mark had presented it to Chris, because the first time Chris was working on a project, didn't have time for it. And so he and Mark got together at that convention, and Mark gave him what he had to read overnight. And actually, I met Chris at breakfast, and Chris was like, you know what I'm going to do is, I'm going to tell him, gee, I got some bad news. I read it, and I really love it. I want to do this project. Just because he wanted to kind of tweak Mark a little bit before he gave him the good news.
That's pretty awesome. It's always nice to tweak Mark a little bit there, isn't it?
Yeah. But so I got to see and like listen to a lot of the stuff, that they talked about starting off. And I had pitched Chris my first book of Reluctant Druid at that same breakfast. And he was like, yeah, that sounds like something I'd like to read. But I didn't have a finished manuscript at the time, so that's pretty much where it ended. And then when they decided to do Fistful of Credits, which was the first anthology, Mark came to me and said, look, you're struggling to finish a novel. Do a short story. It's 8,000 words. You can finish that. And Chris said that if you turn in a short story, he'll take a look at it. No promises, but he will take a look at it. And so then I came up with the whole idea of, mercenaries and mechas and space armor, like space Vikings. This universe needs space Vikings.
And it absolutely did. That's sort of how he invited me into the Four Horsemen Universe, and my answer was Space Canadians. So maybe we're slightly different.
But I got the image for Bjorn in my head. I'm like, okay, now I've got this character. Now I need to come up with this story and squeeze it in, 8,000 words. But I did that with Surf and Turf, which was my story in Fistful of Credits, turned it in, and at LibertyCon, which is when the book was coming out, Chris told me, look, if your book's as good as the short story, I'll publish it.
And to be honest, they are. We'll get to the Reluctant Druid here in a moment. I just want to mention that you and I will both be at In Conjunction, which is 2 weekends after this particular show is airing. So we'll actually get a chance to sort of relive the beginning of the Four Horsemen along with Mark at that convention. So let's talk about, obviously, since I'm now handling the fantasy side of things at Chris Kennedy, I'm really interested in more Milesian Accord stuff, because it is the what I would consider the flagship series of New Mythology Press at the moment. And tell us about the Milesian Accord series and where you think that's going to go.
Oh, so one of the popular tropes in various, not only fantasy or urban fantasy universes, but in like game settings too, is magic coming back to the world. A good example of that would be Shadowrun.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of Charles DeLint and Kevin Hearn. And I was like, well, what would it look like if magic came back to our world? And one of the ideas that batted around my head was the Irish invasion myths, where there's the 7 invasions of Ireland and the Labor Gabala. And it ends with the Milesians, who are mankind, defeating the Tuatha Dé Danann and driving them into the underworld. And I'm like, well, what if that's why we no longer have magic and supernatural creatures? Is because when they lost, all the magic went with them. Well, then the question becomes, how does it come back? The scene in the bookstore where Pixel approaches Liam, the reluctant druid, is the first scene that popped in my head of her approaching this guy who is just kind of a almost midlife crisis kind of drifter, underachiever, working at a bookstore, living in his family's old house. And then she turns up and his world gets turned upside down.
Well, one of the things I really like about that series is that premise that you started with. Yeah, it draws from Irish mythology and creatures at the start, but one of my favorite aspects is the way you couch that. It's now a worldwide thing, and so you've had a lot of fun. At least it seems to me, I've had a lot of fun reading them. At least that you've been pulling from all sorts of mythological traditions to add to your stories.
Right, because the Celtic myths, wouldn't have existed in a vacuum.
Sure.
And so if they were real, then why wouldn't, after all, we see that the Norse myth was, quote unquote real. We have appearances from Baba Yaga, some of Sumerian or Assyrian assassin demons. Of course, the whole, Abrahamic kind of celestial, angelic side there.
It's all on the table because you also have some Native American stuff and you had some Mesoamerican in there as well, didn't you? Am I remembering that correctly?
There's been a couple of passing references, yes.
Yeah. So it's all in there. And that's one of my favorite aspects about that entire series, I have to say. That and the fact that they're fun reads and there's a lot of action and all the things that I like in stories. So that about covers all of our topics. Now it's time for you to talk a little bit more about yourself and what your plans are for the upcoming year.
Well, I am overjoyed to be getting back into the convention circuit.
Oh, me too.
Obviously, Fantasy was a big one, and you could tell that I think everyone needed that. The fandom, the authors, everyone. As you said, In Conjunction's coming back up. Dragon Con's later this year. I'll be going to Gen Con, although I won't be. Actually, this year be the first Gen Con in a long time. I haven't run something at it, so I'll just be attending.
But next year, I suspect you'll be trying to push an entire 4HU track of role-playing scenarios.
Oh yeah. Well, I want to do enough to get it out there. One of the challenges with Gen Con is if you run stuff, when you're running stuff, that's not time you're spending playing. So I don't want to just book myself wall to wall.
Sure.
But the past few years I've been involved with this steampunk LARP group, and they're tabletop and LARP. But I've been GMing for them, and I've run actually a Milesian Accord scenario at Gen Con.
Nice. So what are you working on with your writing?
So the writing right now, I'm working on actually the sequel to the Milesian Accords trilogy, The House Between Worlds.
Yes, that's great to hear.
So now we see the fallout of the conclusion of the third book. We get to reconnect with some of our favorite characters, and we get several new characters, all bringing their own drama and twist into this new world.
Anything more from Bjorn's Berserkers?
Bjorn's Berserkers, there's a story in the In the Wings anthology that's coming out. Obviously, Bjorn will be returning to the next storyline in the Four Horsemen Universe, because Guild Wars is about to conclude. And there's been some talks for Bjorn and the Berserkers to make an appearance somewhere else. Mark and I have talked about something that's related to the Kickstarter, possibly having them appear in that. I have a sequel that I have to fit in somewhere to the YA book, Bjorn. I have to find time to write Graduation Day.
Nice. Lots of stuff going on in your world. That's great to hear. But so in that case, I think it's probably time to let you get back to writing. As the sub factory boss, get back to finishing that Milesian Accord novel. I'm anxious to read it.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope that we'll have it out to Halloweenish.
Yeah, that's my hope too. That's currently where I have it penciled in, and we'll celebrate it over jack-o'-lanterns and candy corn or something of that sort.
Jon, we really appreciate you coming on to the show, man. Before we let you slide, tell people where they can find not only your stuff, web, social media, so on and so forth, but also where they can find more information about the 4HU RPG Kickstarter.
Alrighty, so for me, it's pretty easy. My website is jonrosborne.com. You can find me on Facebook at Jon R. Osborne, Instagram at Jon R. Osborne. You can also find me on the Chris Kennedy Publishing website under my name. The easiest way to find the Kickstarter is to go to Kickstarter itself and search for the Four Horsemen Universe. However, you can also readily find links if you go into Facebook to the Merc Guild, which is the 4HU fan group.
Nice. And from what I understand on the Kickstarter, like there are different levels of things that you can spend money on, and you get perks for that, right?
Oh, absolutely. One of the fun things about Kickstarters is you have lots of ways in. So, you can go in just as basic and get the PDF or just a book, because one of our goals with this Kickstarter is to make a product that's not only for gamers, but that'll also appeal to 4HU fans as a reference book. So not everyone's going to want all the goodies. However, for those who are more interested in the game side of it, then as you go on, you get the cards, dice, and chips used to play the game. We have the Stuffies by Joy Wandry coming online this week. So there's various little stuffed aliens that you can also add to your collection. And
You still have a few more stretch goals, right?
we do indeed. We're at 26,000 now. Our next stretch goal is 30,000, which bumps up the book size. And if we get to 35,000, I've don't know if I've like painted myself in a corner on this, but I've promised that I will also put together a playable Depic booklet that'll be digital only, but it'll have rules for playing a Depic.
Awesome. That is way cool. Well, dude, thanks for stopping by the show, man. We wish you guys all the well and all the best moving forward with this project. It's really exciting times. Jon R. Osborne, folks, go find him on the interwebs on social media. He got lots to offer you. Thanks for coming by, man. Good talking to you.
Thank you. You too.
All right, that's going to bring us down to our halftime segment, which is where we give big-time shout-outs to our presenting sponsor, that, of course, being Chris Kennedy Publishing. If you want more information on them, you can go to the website, chriskennedypublishing.com. They got everything you need, including not one, but two, count them, two new releases this week. One of those is from the boss man himself, and it is a big one, folks. That would be the Progenitor's War from Chris Kennedy. This thing is the third installment and the final installment, I believe, of the Theogony trilogy of trilogies. That's freaking varsity, boys, when you can do not one but three trilogies and tie them all together. Oh, yeah, that's big time.
No doubt.
I agree. But he's the boss. So,
Rob, what do we got for the Progenitor's War? What's this thing all about?
All right. Lieutenant Commander Sean Calvin Hobbs and the crew of the Vela Gulf. Side note, I really like how he plays with names. His names in his book. And the crew of the Vela Gulf went back in time to find the technology they needed to beat their enemy in the present. But it doesn't exist. They only have one option. Fight the enemy in the past and destroy them there. Unfortunately, the enemy has overwhelming numbers, and while the enemy doesn't have the technology that Terrans have, quantity does have a quality all its own. And then there is the enemy's 25-mile-wide command ship. If the enemy should finish it, they will have an overwhelming force with which to sweep the Terrans from the galaxy. The Terrans must establish the warrior cartel Admiral Shepard has been placed in charge of, if they are to defend the people of the past and destroy the enemy for all times. The Emperor hasn't funded the cartel, though, and Shepard will have to figure out how to do it on his own. Although the Terrans were initially able to hold back the enemy forces, when the enemy steals a jumping missile, all bets are off. The ability to run to the Djinn universe is the only advantage the Terrans have. If the enemy unlocks the secrets of the Djinn universe, there will be nowhere else for the Terrans to hide, and no way that they can win the Progenitor's War.
Nice. Kevin, what are the Pepples saying about this book?
all right, what we got here from Ken. I like how Mr. Kennedy developed the characters over the course of the story along with their relationship with members of the team. You really get a feel for the military comradeship?
Sriracha's.
Comrade. And the connection that comes with being in combat together. Now, Doug says Chris does an excellent job of wrapping up this trilogy. It has the action and pacing I love while keeping us readers on the edges of our seats, hoping the good guys win. I won't tell you how it ends, but you will love it. There we go.
Very cool. I'd be remiss if I didn't note that Patreon subscribers for the Chris Kennedy Publishing Patreon account have already heard an excerpt from this. Chris was one of this month's CKP authors to do CKP Confidential, and his selection of choice was an excerpt from Progenitor's War. So if you want to go check that out, CKP Patreon, man, there's a lot happening over there right now. Would also be remiss if I didn't mention that the other author for this month would be Rob Howe for his new book, and we're going to get to that here in just a second. Before Before we get there, though, I did mention that there was another release this week. And that's another book in the Hit World universe. Man, this thing is freaking blowing up. That's from, Larry Hoy and Bill Webb. This one is I believe it's the 5th book in the series, called SHANK, from Robert Krog. And man, I'm so ready for these things to hit audio so I can start checking them out. I mean, from what I understand, this is John Wick with a sci-fi twist and even like a hint of fantasy. So basically everything that is Chris Kennedy Publishing all wrapped up into one freaking series. But again, the name of the new release is SHANK, and that is from Robert Krog, and that is also out and available, so go check those out. Speaking of audio, we got new for that this week would be Big Time in the 4HU. That is the 10th book in the Guild Wars, Sword of Minerva, from the man himself, Mark Wandry, creator of the series. This one deals into some big-time stuff, particularly with the SIs, the synthetic intelligence, that we're starting to hear a lot more about. Obviously, Chris and I dealt with that a good bit in the Street Survivors, and our new book that we have already started writing, that's going to be the follow-up to that, is going to deal hardcore with that. But if you want to turn back the clock a little bit, Sword of Minerva from Mark Wandry, book 10 in the Guild Wars, is now available in audio, so you can go check that out. We also had a new anthology drop a couple of weeks ago in the We Dare series, and if you're not familiar what that is, well, now's the opportunity to do it, because the first anthology, called We Dare, is on sale this week for 99 cents. It's the book of the week. Can't go wrong with an anthology for $1, guys. It's 15 stories that deal with basically humanity's desire to compete with each other. This is set in the not-too-distant future when things like technological implants, physical augmentations, gene therapies, that sort of stuff is all on the table. If you want to get it and strike out on your own to beat the competition, this is all there. And again, 15 really fantastic authors got together to put this thing together. That is We Dare, the anthology from Chris Kennedy Publishing, book 1, and that is on sale this week for less than $1. And then finally, we've teased it enough, the pre-release for this week, meaning, I believe, and Rob, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, the pre-release is the new book from Rob Howell. That is, of course, the follow-up to his 4HU book, and this is The Ravening of Wolves. People can get that from the publisher right now, correct? And then it goes live on Friday?
That's the plan.
Okay, so ChrisKennedyPublishing.com. You can go find that now. Man, I loved what you read in the CKP Confidential episode that we recorded earlier on this month. I mean, it really sounds like this is just a gorgeous follow-up to Feeding of Sorrows. Folks who love that book are really going to fall in love with this one, I'm sure of it. Tell folks a little bit about what they can expect when they go grab this.
Well, basically, they can expect that it's all about action. I should say it's all about getting ready to fight and then the fight. The first part, if you've been in the military, I've aimed at those of you who've experienced the challenges of being in the military and having to prepare to do something without enough resources, without enough time, but you don't have a choice because the battle's coming, whether you like it or not. And the first half is them trying to get as ready as they can after the battle that ended the Feeding of Sorrows. And there are some challenges that they face. They don't have enough supply. They don't have the right kind of supply. They run low on munitions, MAC rounds. There's a shortage of them because mercs are just using them so much. They've got some new toys to play with. They don't know how to use them. And they have these new allies that were literally days before the start of the Ravening of Wolves, their opponents. But since we now know at the end of Ravening of Wolves that maybe there's some other things going on to get them to fight each other, maybe it's time for them to join forces. And so there's all these challenges, but most of it is action. There's about, I think, the last 3 sections, which comprise the battle, are each about 20,000 words apiece.
Awesome.
So it is basically one big, long, extended battle. Big, long, extended campaign.
We have come to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and we are all out of bubblegum.
We were, in fact, all out of bubblegum. So I had a lot of fun with that, and I hope it resonates with those who were in the military, because I got a lot of help from friends of mine who said, well, this happened to me. Let me tell you this story. Of course, they use the ancient time-honored words, which you probably shouldn't use here. But yeah, I heard quite a few stories that fed into some of the events that happened in this. A lot of the bad things that happened in the lead up are things that buddies of mine had, in fact, faced during their time in the military.
Wow. Well, dude, I'm really looking forward to grabbing that one when it finally drops on audio. Most definitely. The Ravening of Wolves, folks, the brand new novel from Rob Howe. It is available now exclusively through Chris Kennedy Publishing, so you can go to the website, chriskennedypublishing.com, and grab that. Drops worldwide in all of its glory on Friday. Of course, that would be the Amazon machine. Now, before we get to pod mail, and we got some great questions on tap from listeners this week, Brother Steverson, rumor has it you had an announcement or a surprise of some kind. What's the deal with that?
I do. Tomorrow's my 39th birthday for the 14th time. And so Chris, he hit me with a surprise. I knew it was coming, didn't know when, and we've been working towards it. So on July 12th, I have a new book coming out called Orbital Defense Corps. It is 9 science fiction short stories of mine. The Orbital Defense Corps is a new story that brings new characters into the salvage system, and then there'll be a lot more on them later. Awesome. And then the 9 other stories, they were in anthologies all over the place, and they were in some We Dares, and they were in what we call the Chris book. And so a lot of the fans, the salvage fans, hadn't had a chance to read some of these, and even the Four Horsemen fans, because 4 of the stories are Four Horsemen. But the big thing is, tomorrow he's going to announce it and post the cover and all that kind of thing. But what he has actually done is a real pre-order on Amazon. Ooh. And he doesn't do that, and he hasn't done that, and this is his first one, I believe. So as of tomorrow, when it pops up, people can pre-order it. And on the 12th of July, it'll drop into their inbox and be there for their Kindle.
Awesome.
And so, fingers are crossed that this does well, because, it with the way the algorithms work and everything else, this could be a game changer.
Oh, yeah. Folks, if you don't follow Chris Kennedy Publishing online, specifically on Facebook, that's definitely worth your time. You can follow the press page, Chris Kennedy Publishing, which I think is at CK Publishing. But the groups are really where it's at. So if you're a 4HU fan, 4HU, the Merc Guild group, is a private group that's managed by basically all of your core authors. So the Mark Wandrys of the world and the Kevin Eichenberrys, the Casey Azels, everybody's hanging out in there. And then for kind of the larger CKP crew, you log into the Factory Floor group, and that's everybody from 4HU, and then as well as everybody else from all the other CKP worlds, whether it's new mythology stuff, whether it's salvage stuff, everybody's in the Factory Floor. So definitely worth your time. But that's awesome, dude. Be able to knock out a pre-record. By the time this hits a lot of people's ear holes, that will be out into the world. So folks, go find that and make sure you check it out. That'll be awesome.
Let me follow up on something you said there, Ian. If you're not on Facebook, and I know a lot of people are leaving that medium, there's also a Four Horsemen group on MeWe. There's a new mythology group on MeWe, and there's also a new mythology Discord channel that's already starting to see quite a bit of action. All the authors are there, and it's for fans and authors to really get the chance to interact in a little bit faster paced environment than Facebook sometimes allows.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I'm on MeWe, and that is a platform that I could definitely stand to spend some more time on. I like the fact that it's a very simple platform to use. It does offer groups and pages and stuff like that, but it just doesn't seem to be the Frankenstein's monster that is the machine, the meat grinder, the thing that is Facebook. But yeah, good stuff abounds, man. No matter where you want to follow CKP on social media, it's a decent bet that they are there. So without further ado, let's get into some listener mail and some pod mail. Yeah, here we go.
You got mail.
Okay, first question comes to us from Mark, who says, I'll admit to being lockstep with Ian on being a bit burned out on the Marvel stuff. That said, I was always a big Tom Hiddleston fan, so I had to give Loki a shot. And I've got to admit, it's not too darn bad. Did you guys get a chance to check out the premiere? And if so, what were your thoughts? I know you guys aren't big comic book fans, so I'll jump on this one. I did actually check out the first episode of Loki last week for the exact same reason that you mentioned, which is Tom Hiddleston is one of the finest casting selections that Marvel ever made in the MCU. I mean, the guy rocks it. Even as butt sorry of a movie as Thor: The Dark World was, anytime he's on screen, he steals it. I mean, he rocks it out of the park. So I did want to check it out and see what they did. It was surprisingly different. I like the twist that they're kind of putting on the story. I did not read the comics, so to me, all of this is kind of new terrain. You got Owen Wilson there as like the agent, the agent in charge of this TVA organization. He's Owen Wilson. I mean, he's like Sam Jackson. Those guys pretty much have like one speed. They play the same character in every movie. They don't really stretch a whole lot, and that's fine, for what they do. In this case, Owen Wilson is Owen Wilson, future time cop guy. And the way they really kind of screw with Loki's head to bring him down to earth, pun intended, is neat. And by the time you get to the end of the premiere, you really did have a nice character moment and a vulnerability in that character being, of course, Loki, that you haven't seen before. And Hiddleston, being the awesome actor that he is, absolutely rocked it, and it was worth watching. So, I'm looking forward to episode 2. I think that drops later on this week, too, the Wednesday or Thursday. I'll definitely be checking that out. But guys, I highly recommend that. It's not the typical Marvel fare. It's kind of out there a little bit. It's a little trippy. And a little bit of a mind bender, which they're definitely dealing hard in this whole multiverse concept, and that's about to go hot and heavy, and it's neat. It's with this particular setup anyway. It's a nice addition. Hopefully they don't blow it down the line. Next question comes to us from TJ. Yo, dudes, I hear you guys talk a lot on this show about grilling and barbecue, and while that is awesome, as a single dad, I don't exactly always have the time to go spend 2 hours firing off behind the Weber. Do you guys have any food recommendations for those of us who operate every week in a time crunch? Kevin, you're all about some crock-pot pork chops, man. What you got to say there?
Oh my God! Listen, 2 cans of mushroom soup, dump it in the pot, drop in the pork chops, and you're golden. And if you're not going to do pork chops, a couple chicken breasts, 1 can of mushroom soup, and 1 can of cream of chicken. It's there.
Try the cream of chicken with herbs. That's a nice break.
A friend of mine drops 1 cream of chicken and 1 cream of celery.
Okay.
And he likes that. So, yeah, it's a little different. But, yeah, crock-pot's king. As a matter of fact, we had Salisbury steak tonight that was in the crock pot all day long. So,
Rob, you got any culinary cooking recommendations for people on the fly?
Yeah, I mean, I use crock pots too. But a lot of times I'll figure out that I need to cook something and I only have 15 minutes, and obviously crock pot isn't necessarily going to work for that. So I have a number of dishes I do. One is sort of mushroom goo, and it takes a can of cream of mushroom soup and some hamburger, and I grill the hamburger up, and I throw an onion in there and grill it up, and then throw cream of mushroom soup in, and poof, you have something. And then if you have a rice maker, you can get that going, and it does it on its own. If I don't have those things on hand, or the hamburger isn't necessarily as didn't necessarily thought out, one of my standards is I often have various cans of black beans or red beans in my pantry. I just put a couple of those into a saucepan, and then I also generally keep pre-cooked brats or of various types from Johnsonville. So I will cut up a few of those, open up a couple of cans of beans, and then throw whatever spices seem handy or interesting, usually a lot of garlic, because I like garlic, and then let it simmer for a bit. And I've literally spent 2 or 3 minutes doing the prep work, and every once in a while coming back and stirring it. So that's a good one for me, and it's just beans and weenies, except they're usually a lot tastier than your normal ones.
Nice. Yeah, I am a big fan of the crock-pot stuff myself. We actually did crock-pot stuff this evening. Sort of a same take on what Kevin was talking about. We keep a lot of venison stuff in the freezer from hunting season. Huge thanks to my dad and his buddy Jimmy for helping me out, keeping me stocked with that. But we'll take a packet or 2 of cube steak out, drop it in the crock-pot, and then I will take, and props to my wife for finding this recipe on Pinterest, we'll take a can of cream of mushroom soup, a can of condensed French onion soup, an au jus seasoning packet, and a half a cup of water. Whisk all of that together, and I pour that over the cube steak with some diced peppers, onions, mushrooms if I've got it laying around, and let it roll. And about 6 hours later, it's good to go. I'll whisk in a little bit of cornstarch about 30 minutes before serving. That kind of thickens the gravy a little bit. And serve it over some rice from the rice cooker, a little bit of veggies on the side, like easy steam, something like that. And it's the most like low work, low prep meal you could ask for. As far as non-crock pot stuff, my man card may go on suspension for this, but I don't care. It's my freaking show. I caught a great recipe long time ago from Rachel Ray that has always stuck with me. She calls it pizzagna. And basically, it's a hybrid of pizza and lasagna. You mix up all of the stuff that you would want on a pizza. So for me, like, that's veggies galore in meat. So green peppers, onions, drop in a can of black olives, maybe some mushrooms, dice up some pepperoni. If you want to brown a little bit of ground beef or something like that and throw that in there, you can, but you mix that up and that's your sauce. And then you boil some pasta. So whatever you got laying around, elbows, rotini, whatever, you boil that down. Drain it out, dump it in a pot, and then you dump in a cup of just an 8-ounce canister of ricotta cheese and mix that up really good. Mix the ricotta and the pasta, and then put that in a casserole dish. Put your pizza sauce over the top it with some cheese, drop it in the oven long enough just to melt the cheese and heat everything up and mesh all your ricotta and everything together. Whole thing from prep to cook's 30 minutes or less. And it's always a favorite around our house. You can deck it out with whatever you like on pizza. If you're into ham and pineapple, you can throw that in there, and it's fine. And it makes a ton. You can do it on a budget. And again, whole thing from prep to table is 30 minutes or less. If you do fancy yourself a social media person in that regard, listen, man, you really can't go wrong with a Pinterest account. There are tons of folks out there who do nothing but sit around all day and pin easy-to-cook menus. My wife's got an account. She finds tons of great stuff for our household over on that platform. So definitely worth your time. And props to you on being a single dad, dude. That's freaking tough plight, but way to keep your head up and keep digging, man. That is awesome. Thanks for listening to our show. All right, next question comes to us from Tom. Hey fellas, greetings from 4HU Nation in Utah. Considering that all three of you have written in this series, it stands to reason that you're very familiar with the universe. That said, who are some of your favorite 4HU characters that aren't your own? Kevin, what say you, man?
Wow, that aren't my own.
That are not your own.
Because, I got Ricky and Keaton and Gyro and Larth. And, wow. I really like Hrint, who was the first enforcer. Kevin Eikenberry wrote about him. I really like that character. I really like him and his journey through the 4HU. So I'm going to have to go with Hrint.
Okay. Rob?
For me, I got to go old school because I'm not exactly the most svelte dude in existence. And I always kind of like it when the pudgy dude gets ahead. So I'm going to go James Cartwright. I really appreciate all of Cartwright's Cavaliers and the way he works at it. So there's my character that I really like.
Yeah, it's tough to go wrong with Jim Cartwright, man. I mean, listen, there's a reason why Cartwright's Cavaliers exploded out of the gate and is the foundation that entire universe was built on. I mean, Mark created not only a great world, but a great character that could serve as the perfect lens for readers to enter it through. Jim was a great guy and a guy that you just really love to root for. We talk about it on this show all the time, man. I mean, it really does come down to the characters and the people. And if the writer can rope you in with that, you got yourself a hit on your hands. And so it's no wonder that Cartwright's was a big deal and Jim was a big part of that. I'm going to go with another Wandery book, and that's going to be Alexis Cromwell from Winged Hussars. I like that trope. I like that type of character who, and I said this actually about her on another panel for a con. She's like to borrow a line from the replacement, she's a duck on the pond. Like everything is really, really, really calm and cool and collected upstairs on the surface, but underneath those feet are pedaling just a million miles a minute. And that's Alexis Cromwell. She's very much a thinker. She's always running the math, always running the numbers. And oh, by the by, really freaking awesome ship in that book. So, there are some other things that come into play with the Winged Hussars. I don't want to spoil that for anybody who hasn't read that book, but it's just neat. And it dials into a lot of familiar stuff in sci-fi land that I've always enjoyed. So I'll stick with Alexis on that one. All right, last question comes to us from Alan. If there's anything I know about Rob Howe, Rob, you got a fan. After following him on Twitter these last few years, it's that 1, he loves to write, and 2, that man loves Rush. I think we can all safely agree that Neil Peart is the greatest rock drummer of all time. However, who would be some of your other favorites in line with that category?
Well,
Rob?
in the non-Neil category, I will say that let's look at some of the people that Neil admired. Keith Moon comes to mind. It would have been interesting to see how he would have ended up.
Sure.
Had he lived his life. But he was live fast, die hard, live fast, die fast kind of guy. So was John Bonham, who sort of fits in there. But I think of the ones that exist today, I think my favorite is probably Mike Portnoy, because he's such a chameleon. He basically can play just about any kind of music and do it well, and add a lot of intricacies and artistic touches. So I would go Portnoy.
Okay. Kev?
Wow. My favorite that is not writing all the songs, because as a songwriter, that's the other thing that I loved about Rush's drummer. He wrote those lyrics. Those were his songs, and a lot of those songs were written to a drum beat, and you can tell when you hear them, when you hear the delivery. But I would go with, and this may surprise both of you, I really love and always loved Bruce Crump. He was Molly Hatchet's drummer. He was your prototypical Southern rock drummer, but he was so skilled. And for those of you out there listening, just go find "Satisfied Man" by Molly Hatchet and listen to those drums.
Nice.
But Bruce Crump was an incredible drummer. And if you want to go what's happening right now, modern, Ray Luzier, who's with Korn, is a ridiculous drummer. Ridiculous. Maybe I'm biased. Maybe I'm biased because I know him personally. And he actually did play the drums on a Cypress Spring song. But he is ridiculous. So.
All right.
He's amazing. That leads me to another drummer, and I'm blanking on his last name, but the drummer for Tool, Danny Carey, is the weird things that Tool does with their pacing and their time signatures, along with Korn, and Korn does that as well.
Yeah,
so
some
I'm
great
right there
feels.
with you.
Great feels in there.
Yeah. So those are some others.
I'm actually going to go back with a little bit more old school myself, and Stuart Copeland from The Police was always one that I liked a lot. Very, very, very jazz heavy influence there. Yeah, there's a lot of Police stuff I can listen to just for the percussion. He's spectacular.
I'll agree. He was always in the pocket. Always. Even if you watch some of their live stuff and that kind of thing, he's right there. So,
yeah. Another guy that I like a lot, and very much in that same vein, that same style, is Carter Beauford, Dave Matthews Band. That guy's kit is freaking enormous when you see him live. I've never seen him live, just on YouTube and video clips and whatnot. But very much in that same jazz style, a lot of offbeat syncopated stuff, very much all over the place. There's nothing straightforward about how he plays the drums. I like that style. Rob, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was following up on something you said. I don't know if you've seen it, but Sam Nunn did an 11-part series, I think it's 11-part, called Metal Evolution, which is just a documentary on how heavy metal evolved. It's fantastic. It really is amazing. But one of the people he interviews is Bill Ward, and he's talking about, of course, how Black Sabbath got that sound that leads into heavy metal. And one of the things he emphasized, you talked about jazz, he too talked about jazz. More specifically, he's talking about the Glenn Miller kind of jazz, and he's talking about how "In the Mood" is a really a pretty metal song if you really wanted to play it just with the distortion and tried to do it in that particular genre. But taking that style of the 1940s jazz like that and Chattanooga Choo Choo, and then translating that into the darker, grimmer style that Black Sabbath had, that was one of his big influences at the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one thing I love about watching music documentaries is just to listen to these guys talk about their influences and where they came from. And, to me, that's oftentimes a characteristic of the artists versus the players. There's a lot of people out there that can play instruments, play them well, play them proficiently. But the ones you really think of as being virtuosos are the ones that go way beyond whatever it is their genre of choice is. Slash from Guns N' Roses is a guy that comes to mind. That's a guy that can play anything. He can play classical, he can play hard rock, he can play jazz. You can just about hand him any guitar under the sun and he can play that guitar in any style that you want him to. So, we talk about that with writers, man. Just because you write sci-fi doesn't mean you should read exclusively sci-fi. Go read other stuff. Go read mysteries. Go read westerns. Go read crime thrillers. All of those contain elements that you can then bring back into your art and make it that much more rich. So, music's the same way, man. It always has been. So, all right, well, I think that's coming down to the hour, which is going to take us down to White Flag. And boy, do I have some stuff to look forward to in the coming weeks ahead. So let's hit it.
White Flag.
White Flag is, of course, the segment where we talk about what's on our radar coming up in the next few weeks. And for every person on this podcast, that is going to be Lasers and Lagers, happening June 29th at the Library on Beck Craft Beer and Wine Bar in sunny, gorgeous Panama City, Florida. We are really stoked about this. If you want to know more about the event, just go to lasersandlagers.com and you can read about who's going to be there. We got author bios and links to our pages. Follow Shark Flight Media on social media. It's been all over the place. We're beyond ecstatic to do this, because as authors, we love getting together, and particularly when there's beer involved. I mean, come on. But in this instance, all the proceeds from our door raffle are going to benefit the Bay County Public Library. And, Chris Kennedy and I talked about this recently on an interview that we did on the Unstacked podcast. Libraries are an amazing thing, man. And even in 2021, that's still the case. There's a crap load of people out there who are self-made millionaires, not because they had the money to go to college, but because they went to a library and bought some books and said, you know what, I have a thing and I'm going to take it to market. Or, I think I make a good pizza. I'm going to open a pizzeria and I need to know how to run my own business, so that's going to happen. Or tons of people just go to libraries to get books just to escape and think about something different. And the library gives them that opportunity, particularly for people who can't afford to go out and drop, 10, 15, 20 bucks a pop to buy books. You can get them at the library. So, as writers, library is a big deal to all of us, and it's something we're really passionate about. And in this particular instance, we get to give back to that. So again, June 29th, starting at 5 p.m., Library on Beck Craft Beer and Wine Bar in Panama City, Florida. We would certainly invite you guys to come on out. We're going to have a door raffle, giving away all kinds of signed books. We got t-shirts, we got merch. The bar is going to throw in a couple of tabs. So if you live in that area, maybe you get yourself some free drinks on the house. Going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, that is first and foremost what I got going on. Rob, what's going on with you outside of Lasers and Lagers in the next few weeks?
Well, Friday, of course, Ravening of Wolves. Like I've been saying, I'm really excited that it's coming up, and I think you guys are going to love it. I always feel that when I finish a novel at this point in my life, that it's the best one I've ever written, because as I keep writing, I keep getting better. And I do think this is the best one I've ever written. I think I did transitions better than I ever have before. I think you'll enjoy some of the humor that's in there that I didn't necessarily put as much in Feeding of Sorrows as I wanted to. Because even though it's a hard, crunchy book, and not everybody survives. Spoiler alert: I kill some people. It's got a lot of grim humor that I didn't necessarily put in. And so I'm getting better, and that's always part of the best part. As for what's coming up soon for me, I'm in the midst of writing a story for Kevin that is a little bit more whimsical, a lot more humorous than anything else I've written, and I look forward to getting that to him by the end of the month.
Kev, what's happening with you?
I'm just I'm finishing up a short story myself, because I have to have two of them. The anthologies are back to back. It's going to be in Salvage, so there's a due date of June 30th and another one of July 31st. And I'm starting to get the stories in that are due in June, and so I'm looking forward to reading all those and sending back any feedback and that kind of thing. Everybody's a consummate professional in this one. This is not one that had a open call, so everybody is established authors that are writing these. So as far as the craft and that kind of thing, that's not something I'll have to edit. It's just little tweaks with the canon and that kind of thing is all really I have to worry about. So I look forward to getting Rob's story, because I know it's going to be a great one. So
very cool.
I certainly hope to live up to your expectations. I'm having a lot of fun writing it, and it's going to have some interesting twists that, I don't know, might refer... It turns out today's podcast might have some connection to the end of the story.
Nice. Yeah, I'm happy to report in my short story for that, one of those anthologies, I created an alien cigarette boat.
Yeah, he did.
It's freaking awesome. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks so much, as always, for joining me for this little thing we call the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. Thanks to Jon R. Osborne for coming on the show and telling us all about the exciting news of the Four Horsemen Universe role-playing game. Go find that on Kickstarter. People support it. You can also find Jon online and on social media to find out about his books and everything else he's got going on. Told you about Lasers and Loggers. One more time, lasersandloggers.com is the event where you can find that, happening June 29th, so we hope you'll tag along. And we hope you'll also support our sponsor, that's Chris Kennedy Publishing. Doesn't matter what you're into, folks. Mill, sci-fi, space opera, fantasy, craft, they got it all at chriskennedypublishing.com, because they are message-free sci-fi with a slice of fantasy. As for us, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with some special content on site from Lasers and Loggers, so look out for that. In the meantime, feel free to find us online. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and as individuals, we're all on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Plus, MeWe. Who knows, maybe do a little bit more on that platform later. But in the meantime, you guys take care, and we'll see you next time on the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. See ya.